obviously he desperately needs $83 million. And so he's pulling out the old racist trope to try to get money from his suckers, from his cult members. It's amazing. I wonder how many people have just had their savings wiped out by Donald Trump. With the automatic, the box is pre-clicked to, oh yes, please take this money, and another box is pre-clicked, yes, please double the amount, or what. I don't know if it's in the case with this particular fundraiser, because I didn't click through, but it has so often been the case in the past. These just really skeezy fundraising efforts. It's incredible. So we got a lot to talk about today. There's a trucker convoy heading down to the Texas border, and they're having some problems. I'll tell you about that in a moment. Also, a son has beheaded his liberal dad. Is Donald Trump growing a Taliban movement right here in America? We'll get into those in the first hour. Also, why are too many Americans ignoring the ongoing collapse of democracy in America? We'll talk about that. In a new book, Tim Alberta, our one guest for the day, is going to drop by, and we're going to have an extended conversation with him, about a half hour long, about the kingdom, the power, and the glory, American evangelicals in the age of extremism. And in the third, well, actually, we have two guests today. In our third hour, Heidi Sigmund Kuda is going to drop by, breaking the GOP death grip. And also in the third hour, the Republican and MAGA snowflakes are now mobilizing against their biggest enemy, Taylor Swift. Really? Oh God. This is their plan. We're going to take down Taylor Swift. I love it. Actually, I think it's rather pathetic, but in any case, my op-ed today over at HartmannReport.com is titled, "Why Are Too Many Americans Ignoring the Ongoing Collapse of Democracy in the United States?" And, I start out with this story from, I came across this when reading Don Quixote, Cervan, I believe his name is, famous novel. And he says, don't ever mention rope in the home of a man who's been hanged. Well, it's like, we're seeing this destruction of democracy in America, and it's like very few people want to talk about it. The media, of course, here's Donald Trump is running to suspend the Constitution. He has said this. He wants to suspend the Constitution. He wants to appoint himself a dictator on the first day in office. He wants to essentially end our democracy. He doesn't, he's already told us and shown us that he doesn't respect elections or the American electorate. And yet you've got, networks running promos that say it's a fascinating contest, matchup between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. We've never before had a man running for president who's under indictment. Well, he's not just under indictment. That's the smallest of the things. Why aren't they mentioning the fact that we've never had a candidate for president who says he wants to suspend the Constitution? Why are they not mentioning that we've never had a candidate for president who tried to get the military to turn loaded weapons on protesters? Why are we not mentioning that we've never had a president who told police officers to beat up their subjects and ignore the Supreme Court? But, this is what's going on. Our media exclude that kind of stuff from, basically every conversation because they don't want to offend Republicans. And the Republicans are, all in on this. Jimmy Carter took it head on when he told me on this program. He said, Citizens United violates the essence of what made America a great country in its political system. He said, now it's just an oligarchy with unlimited political bribery being the essence of getting the nominations for president or to elect the president. Jimmy Carter was right. And he said that on this program. This complete subversion of our political system really, grew out of Richard Nixon's 1972 appointment of Lewis Powell to the Supreme Court. Lewis Powell, who authored the First National Bank of Boston versus Bellotti Supreme Court decision in 1978, that fully made corporations persons with rights under the Bill of Rights, and said that one of those rights is the First Amendment right of free speech, and that if a corporation wants to speak, they do it with money, and therefore money is protected free speech. Money poured down the throats of politicians. Money poured into political campaigns. Money spent, by the hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars to change people's minds with regard to ballot initiatives and things like that. And as a result, we now have, some districts so gerrymandered that a 50-50 electorate produces a 70-30 outcome, in congressional representation. That our bills are written, and more often than not, by corporate lobbyists or representatives of billionaire-level wealth. And our media is owned by the same, class of investors and stockholders. Back in 1926, The Decline of the West was published in English. It had been published in German in 1918, before that, by Oswald Spengler. Spengler was one of the more well-known thinkers of that era. Now, Spengler himself was a fan of fascism. So keep that in mind as I tell you about this. In 1926, when Decline of the West was published, Spengler said that culture, specifically Western culture, he was talking about German and American culture, would eventually become a parody of itself. That average people's expectations would decline while their wants would grow, and that a new peasantry would emerge, which would cause the culture to stabilize into what Spengler called classic form. Now, the word fascism didn't exist when Spengler was writing in 1926, or maybe it had actually he was writing in 1918. I think Mussolini and Giovanni Gentile invented the word fascism in 1921, 22, 23, something like that. But I would use the word to describe what Spengler was talking about. He wrote in Decline of the West, Spengler wrote, "In all high cultures, therefore, there is a peasantry, which is breed stock in the broad sense, and a society, which is assertively and emphatically in form. It is a set of classes or estates, and no doubt are artificial and transitory, but the history of these classes and estates is world history at its highest potential." In other words, we tell the story of history through the stories of rich white men, basically. And according to Spengler, that's how it should be. Right? That's what he's saying. Well, increasingly that's how it's becoming. George Soros chronicled, how we're moving in this direction in his book, The Crisis of Global Capitalism. Irina Hertz and the Silent Takeover. Dark Money by Jane Mayer. Democracy in Chains by Nancy MacLean. I mean, all of these books are documenting how what Spengler was hoping would happen in 1926 is happening actually right now. And it's being driven by 5 corrupt, bought off, in the pocket of billionaire Republicans on the U.S. Supreme Court, now 6. This is why, back in 2018, when Martin Gilens and Benjamin Page famously published this incredible study on the odds of average Americans' political desires actually being turned into law, he found that while rich people, well over half the time, when rich people have a specific desire, it gets turned